Okay, I'd like to call to order the Animal Regulation Subcommittee meeting of May 29th at 7 PM. First order of business is our reorganization. As the town policy bylaw, whatever it falls under, calls for a reorganization of all boards and committees after the election. So that's the purpose of it, even though we only had 3 meetings. We'll go through the formalities and do it. We have any nominations for chairman?
You. Aren't you chairman? Who's chairman?
No, this is a reorganization, so
You can nominate
Oh, no.
anyone.
you can nominate
Right.
anybody you want.
For yourself.
No.
I'll nominate you, Mike.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
I'll keep you there.
Any other nominations? All in favor?
Yes.
Aye.
So we need a nomination for a vice chairperson. I would nominate Jessica.
Jessica. I second.
Did you say you second?
Yeah.
Oh,
Okay. All in favor?
Yes.
aye.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Strangely enough, Linda, you can nominate yourself, you can vote for yourself, and you don't need a second on nominations.
Oh, I didn't know about the not,
Yeah.
no
Yeah.
second.
Yeah.
Huh.
Doesn't matter if you're
Okay.
second or not, but I was just, that's why I didn't call for a second on the first one.
Gotcha.
Just for clarity for us.
He knows all
Thank you.
nitbits.
Anyways, strange little rules that we run across as we do this stuff. All right. Jessica,
Yes.
you were tasked with doing some edits to
Yes.
our last bylaw.
Right.
Were you able to do those and keep the strikes in there so we could see what
Yes.
words you took out?
Yep, so on this draft, I made a note at the top that edits and additions to the previous draft are in italics. Omissions are struck through.
Yep.
I also put them bold and in italics.
Yeah, plus you're adding the date to the top of each one.
Yep. So the main changes are, I came up with on number 5, the density. I changed the wording slightly to guidelines. That was something you had said last time, density guidelines instead of limits. And I came up with the number 10 livestock units per quarter acre.
Where are you on the bottom of the?
Number 5.
Number 5.
Number 5.
And
Does everybody have a copy of this?
yes.
Okay.
And since last time we kind of went through
There it is.
a variety of different states and towns that had them, there is really no standard for that. That was the one that I found. There was a town that it was 10 per .2, I believe. So that's what I based that on. I thought that sounded pretty fair. If we can, of course, discuss that. I put no restrictions on 5 or more acres in agricultural zone. I thought that sounded fair. Of course, this is all based on, if there's cruelty, that's also in here, it's covered, or overcrowding concerns. That's all covered under different sections, but these are just the guidelines. And then I wrote C, Schedule A for livestock units, so that's a main addition. That's on the second to last page. So you'll see Schedule A. This is directly from that site, Mike, that you had gotten the chart from, the visual chart. So these are the numbers that they used. I broke it down. The first grouping is 1 unit, which is basically different kinds of fowl, chicken, dove, duck, goose, guinea fowl, peafowl, pheasant, pigeon, quail, and turkeys, and also rabbits are 1 unit. So that means anyone who has a quarter of an acre could have 10 of those. They could have, 5 ducks and 5 chickens, 10 chickens, or they could decide to have 1 rabbit and, just add them up there. I figured that keeps it simple. The next grouping is the 10 units, alpaca, goat, sheep, miniature horse, llama. Then 20 units. Some of these animals, folks probably don't have a bison, but bison, cattle.
I can get a yak now.
You can have a yak. So 20 units, bison, cattle, donkey, horse, mule, oxen,
Right.
yak. I wasn't sure if I should keep swine. That was just from their page, said swine 20 units, but I wrote also see existing bylaw. since there already is a law for the swine, so I don't know if we
Does our
want
town
to
have one?
include
Right. Yeah, it was already.
them in the
it's already-
units or not.
It's a
I'm not sure.
regulation.
I think you,
Right.
I think you captured it by saying they referred to it.
Right, okay.
Again, just a reminder to anybody that's paying attention to us.
And then at
is
the,
that we're
I'm
only-
sorry.
We're only making a recommendation
Right.
to the Board of Health.
Correct, just a recommendation. If anyone has any suggestions, objections, additions to this list, I also wrote questions at the bottom. Those are questions for us to discuss. Do we want to have any weight guidelines? Example, horses over under a certain number of pounds. Should that change the units? Do we want to have a general weight guideline for animals who may not be listed? Example, using the wording, animals not listed that is over 500 pounds would be 20 units, for example, like just to cover if we missed anything, should we add in a generic like that? So that's just something we could consider.
Does anybody have any questions for Jessica on any of this?
Well, I think we need to read the whole thing through. because
No,
I have-
no, I got it, yeah, yeah. No decisions are gonna be made tonight, this
Oh, I
is
know.
just work in progress, I just, so
Do you-
we're
do you-
just sitting here all looking at the paper with no conversation.
Right.
So if
Well,
nobody
yeah.
else has anything for the moment,
So far, no.
how are we addressing density?
I did add that, actually. Let's see here. That's under, so number 5, the density guidelines. If you look a little further down, letter capital B, then lowercase b, land area, that was something I had written last time. I had taken a note to take land versus usable land into consideration. And also lowercase c, low density area versus high density. I just wrote, please be considerate of your neighbors. And a question for us, do we want to address the high versus low? Because we hadn't quite decided that. I just wanted to put it in there so we could have it as a talking point. And if we want to address it, how do we address it? Because we were saying that's not actually, like, there's nothing that's zoned high versus low, so I don't know how we determine that.
Designation for that?
Right, but I wanted to put it in there as
No,
a talking point,
s-
so.
Similar to that chart that we had, that I brought in the first time, that, with the arrows that got a little confusing, but
Right.
if you study it a little bit, it helps a little bit. Something for a handout. So this is up to interpretation.
Right.
What you say is dense, I say it's not. Right.
Exactly,
Right.
right. That's the question, is how do we define it?
There are no definitions
Right.
in this at all, right?
I-
Right.
Right.
Yeah. Again, this is a starting point.
Yeah.
Just bringing out some points as that we may
Right.
want to consider. It's got to be somewhat simplified so
Mm-hmm.
people can understand it clearly. I appreciate the effort you put in. I just want to make it so it's easy, so you hand it to somebody, they can look at it and say, oh, yeah, I understand what that is.
Right.
Because if I go 10 units for a quarter acre, that's why when you were talking, and then I flipped to this page, so I could have, on a quarter acre, I could have any one of these.
Right, you could
Right.
have 1 sheep, or you could have 10 chickens, it's your choice, so, yep. I figured that kept it simple.
No, I like that.
Right, so if we want to define low density versus high density, is there a way to do that? Because what if someone calls and they say, am I high density or low density, you know?
The example that I used at the last meeting was about village residential. Your village residential on 20,000 square foot is totally different than the median campground, which is also village residential, 20,000 square feet. So that's where we got to try to help them get their head around it. If we just
Right.
send this back, we'll all feel like we wasted our time because they won't pay attention to it, and it's not clear. We've got to help them with the density, trying to figure out what's reasonable. I don't know anybody that would go out and just get a random single animal that's like an alpaca one, you know,
Right,
or a
pack
one
animal.
sheep or something like that. It would be unusual, not impossible, but it would be unusual for somebody to, I always wanted a sheep, I'm gonna get one. So it's something that, I think we need to make something up that captures some of that. That's what I liked about, and I'm not pushing this, I'm just explaining what I liked about it, that sheet with the arrows on it. Something in that format that would identify it, so it's just a handout that the Board of Health person could hand out to the general public. What can I have in my yard? So you hand it to them, so. All right, so over here, so what do you mean about dense, right?
That's the question.
Right, right.
That is the question.
It is.
So if the houses are less than 50 feet apart, you could consider that dense.
It's like near me, that we have 12 lots there cut out before zoning, and they're all 1 acre or less. That's why
Right.
that area there would be considered high density, but then
Right.
right across the street, there's 2 acres. So what do you consider?
Right. So with the high density, Mike, are you suggesting we further restrict the number of units allowed? Or
No, I'm not suggesting that, I'm not suggesting any sort of restriction at all. What I'm suggesting is that we identify it clearly so
Right.
people understand it, so.
But if the suggested number doesn't change, whether it's high or low density, then why do we need to define it? If you're saying it will not
Why
be
does it
further
need to be
restricted?
there at all?
I didn't. say
Right, do
that.
we actually need it?
I didn't suggest that we keep it or to get rid of it. All I
Right.
did was identify an
Right.
issue that I see. So maybe the most productive way is, you got a decent starting point for a bylaw, right? Why don't we, if everybody agrees to it, let's do one section at a time.
Right.
Does section
Okay.
1, the scope and authority, does that make sense to everybody? If it does, we check it off, we move on to the next.
Yeah.
That way we won't bounce around and not get to the end of the task. So under purpose and authority, objective to ensure humane treatment of livestock, protect public health and safety, maintain the rural character and environmental quality of the town. Anybody have any comments or suggestions or agreement on that particular statement?
I think that makes sense.
Huh?
I think that makes sense.
Well,
Yeah.
I don't have anything,
Yep, and I'm only asking
Yep.
these questions.
No, I agree. Just go through it
As
and-
a group,
make it easier for,
and I'm reading them so then people that are sitting here can understand what we're talking about instead of just,
Excuse me, it's a little difficult to hear you.
what's that?
Can't hear you.
yell
Can you move the
Sit
mic a
closer?
little closer?
How's that, Fred?
Whoa,
That good? All right.
ears are ringing.
I've never been accused of being quiet.
That's much better, thanks. If you're louder.
You can also move
Yeah,
your
the
mic
air
up,
conditioning.
Jessica, see how it's tipped down? There you go.
Testing.
You can also put one near you, Linda.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
All right, so now that we're past that and Fred straightened us out. Everybody agrees, no objections to A on purpose and authority?
No, I like it.
That one's okay.
Check mark.
No. Legal basis, authorized under the Massachusetts General Laws, Mass General Law, Chapter 111, Section 125A, Chapter 128, and Local Board of Health and Zoning Authority.
I have a problem with the "and zoning authority," because we wanted to leave out zoning, didn't we? Just,
Nope, so I think what, unless Jessica wants to answer it, I think what she's capturing is conversation's been coming up about where you can put your structures, whether it's a chicken coop or whatever.
Right.
And that would be captured under zoning. So
Right.
it's just identifying the fact that you have to pay attention to zoning laws. It doesn't eliminate you from
Okay.
paying attention to that. You
Right.
still hear me, Fred?
Yeah.
All right.
That's why I included it,
Yep.
because
So that's
a
all.
few of these
It's just to make
reference
sure
the
that,
zoning laws.
and also in this section, the MGL referencing, I did look it up, and this section,
can hear you.
Can't hear me.
You gotta move that
Okay.
microphone closer to you, just like I had to.
This does not include a single animal as like just a pet type thing. This MGL refers to farm animals used for food and raising of animals for food or a commercial purpose. So that's what that MGL is for.
So
Whereas
that's on 111?
Well, that's just,
that's what she has.
but that's an example.
But
It says,
that is not what we're looking for. We're not looking for this to pertain just to farms. If somebody
Okay.
gets 2 horses they want to ride on the sled, that's not a farm.
So what we're
That's just
going, what we're going to do
animal.
to simplify this is, for the next meeting, I'll ask Christian or somebody to print
Yeah.
out these 3 sections, so then we can look at them.
The original one had what they were pertaining to. Well, sorry. It's MGL 111, but MGL XV1, Chapter 111, Section 31. It's the sections that are incorrect, because it is all under that chapter, but it has like 80 sections that pertain to different things about Board of Health. And so it might be Section 31 or Section 155.
we need to list the
Okay.
sections?
Okay.
Isn't it just
Oh, yeah.
under Massachusetts General?
No,
If we're making a reference to it, you should have the proper section.
yeah.
Okay, we can look,
Yep.
I'll look those up and
Yeah,
cross-reference.
I'll
But
try
the-
to look them
Sure.
up as well.
Okay.
and-
The Section 155 is licensing of stables, so that might be different. Might want to add it. Because we don't have that now.
Okay, so we got to put a
Yeah.
question mark here. Anybody's free to look them up and see if it's something that pertains to this, or if there's a missing section out of the chapter. Because this one says, Chapter 111, Section 125A, so I'll look that up and see what that says.
I wrote down operation of a farm to be a nuisance. I think that's what that 125
That sounds
refers to.
familiar.
Okay. What we're not going to do is play
No.
lawyer with this. This will be a problem
No, just something for
the
thought.
next group of people that take this over.
Oh, I'd rather hand them something that they don't have to work on.
I'm not saying,
I mean, that's
I'm not
what we're
saying
trying
we're
to
going to
do.
stop doing our work. I'm just
Yeah.
saying that we're not going to get too carried away with the Mass General laws. That's why we have town council. So I put a question mark on that. Is everybody comfortable skipping over that and going to Section 2?
Yes.
Okay. Section 2, scope of applicability, covered animals, including but not limited to cattle, horses, goats, sheep, swine, poultry, chickens, ducks, turkeys, guinea fowl, peafowl, llamas, alpacas, and other farm animals. I think the statement "and other farm animals" is going to encompass anything.
Too. Includes but not
Has swine restrictions, cite the existing law. So we already have something in our bylaws about
Right.
swine. I believe it's, you can have 4, I think is
Right.
what it is.
I tried to look it up on the website and I didn't readily
It
find
might,
it.
it might be, it might be in the general bylaws.
I found, oh, in general?
Yeah,
I was
No, it's a
looking-
regulation.
It's a regulation, not a bylaw? Okay.
No.
And that's for
The 4.
breeding pigs, not feeder pigs.
No,
It's for keeping
Okay.
pigs on your property.
It has to
There's a
go.
difference.
Well, there's a difference.
There's a big
Are
difference.
you-
But I don't think,
or are you just
I don't think they mentioned breeding or
There's a big-
feeding them.
There's no distinction in the.
You have to look at it.
Keep for a few months and-
Yeah, 6 months and then they're gone.
Right.
You'll have to look at it.
That's totally different than I'm having 4 pigs for my property.
Okay.
Right.
Maybe we could get Kristen to print that out for us.
For a big, you can have more or whatever too.
Right.
Right.
Okay, so this is,
I will get it myself.
you said it wasn't a, did you say it was?
It's a regulation.
Yeah, I'll get a copy of it, find out what it is. Jurisdiction applies to all livestock kept or housed within the town boundaries, whether for personal, agricultural, or commercial purposes. I think that's a fair statement.
That says it all.
Section 3, animal inspector. Let's see.
That was a note from last time. I couldn't find a law pertaining to the animal inspector's rights. Just looking on the website, I didn't find it. So I wasn't sure how to cite or reference that.
That all depends on qualification.
So what we'll do is I'm going to put down job description, and we'll get a copy of it, instead of us guessing what it's supposed to be. Livestock welfare. Animals must have access to clean water, adequate food, and protection from extreme weather. Sound sensible? Anybody have any issues or comments on that? Density. Jessica's touched on this, but we're going to just go through it, so we go through it. Density guidelines and considerations may limit the number of animals per acre based on soil topography and environmental impact. This is something we discussed we're going to work on, but in this particular document, recommended guidelines, 10 livestock units per quarter acre, no restriction on 5 or more acres in an agricultural zone. Schedule A for livestock units, which is attached in the back. Jessica has already read those values.
You could probably strike the next part. That was a note from last time for us to research.
The research part of it.
Right.
Yeah, that's in bold.
So what are you striking?
The
Bolded?
part that says starts with research LUs, and then there's the
Oh.
website. That was just a note from last time to reference that's the site from which I got the guidelines.
So this, you strike A completely?
Not A, just the bottom paragraph of A, the last paragraph that begins with research, the word research, and ends with originated from.
You've totally lost me. Where is she?
5A.
Oh, you're on your old one.
Sorry.
All right.
Put that one completely away. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'll get with it.
So B, considerations, land areas need to be per animal,
That's not it either.
land area needs per animal may vary based on dietary needs. Example, grazing versus grain-fed, the health of the animal, and other conditions or special circumstances. Aged, retired, rescue, infirmed hospice animals, newborns, juvenile animals not yet weaned that are not intended to remain on the premises until adulthood. So I guess that would be your waiver on some of
Correct.
the outlines. Land area versus usable land, topography, wetlands, forested area ought to be taken into consideration when in estimating the area of usable land per animal. Low-density areas versus high-density areas, please be considerate of your neighbors' questions. That's a question for us. Do we want to discuss higher and low density, and if so, how? So that's a section that we need to look a little further on. I'm going to put a question mark on that so we can figure that portion of it out. Exemptions, shelters, rescues, sanctuaries licensed by the Massachusetts Department of Agriculture are exempt from density limitations. I would disagree with that.
Me too.
Whether they're registered or not, you still, if we're considering density, it's more, it's why we're here. It's about the animal as well as the animal owners and the abutting neighbors. All three of them combined make up our decisions as to how we're going to make our recommendations. And I don't think you would be exempt from, especially density, because had a label. And that's just my own personal opinion. I don't know if anybody else has anything they want to add to that.
I wrote that in because going under the MDAR, that they have their own inspections and licensing, so it's almost like referencing the Mass General laws about the, other things, so it's like,
I
it's
don't know
just
who these people are, but I don't think they know where Douglas is.
the Mass Department of Agriculture doesn't know where Douglas is.
I have no idea.
But, so it's just under the assumption that anyone who is registered has an inspection and that they're certified. So
Yep.
that way, like if there's, like, for example, although dogs aren't included, if there's a kennel, obviously you're going to have many more dogs you're licensed by, to have many more, because it's a different sort of
By the
operation.
town of Douglas.
Right. In this
Right.
case, it would be by the MDAR instead.
But this
so-
bylaw goes above and beyond what MGL is, this regulation.
Oh, okay.
So we are greater than, you can never be less than what the state says.
So a town bylaw supersedes a state law?
You could be more stringent.
You can be more
in a,
strict.
But you can't be more relaxed.
Okay.
Okay, so in any law, bylaw, town law or whatever. I'm just going to be polite because he raised his hand and ask him if you have a particular question or.
I believe some of those Massachusetts state laws only apply to agricultural properties 5 acres and higher. So it doesn't really apply to many of the town residential regions we're talking about. I think the majority of those I think a kennel cannot be operated and registered if you're not greater than 5 acres of property.
Well,
Or something to that effect.
so.
Some of that makes
So I'm gonna respond to you, and then I'm gonna explain something because you've missed the last couple meetings, so you don't understand where we are at this point. And so we had opened it up to the people at the first time, then we kind of shut it down on the second meeting, and then we engaged a little bit last meeting, just so we can get through this and be productive with it. We're not making any decisions tonight. We're basically, this is my goal, is to go through this document so we can, if it makes sense, we can leave it alone. And then we're reducing it down to the question sections that we have. It'll be more effective for us. Basically, me and Buzz's punch list, that is how we do things, right? That job's already done, we move on to what the next thing is. And as far as the kennel license, you got to check with our local law, because if you have more than 3 dogs, you get a kennel license. There's 37 kennels, hobby kennels in town. So
30.
That's under the animal control
yeah,
bylaw.
it's just how it works. So we're going to identify things. We're only making a recommendation to the Board of Health. They're going to take this, look at it, agree with it, throw it away, change it, do whatever they need to do with it. We're just trying to help them get through a task. It's not an easy thing to do, right? And we're all animal owners that are sitting at the table. Linda had a horse. She doesn't have any more, but she understands it. We're all passionate about what's going on here. None of us here want to have our rights infringed on. I was very adamant about that the first time I went into the Board of Health, right? So we're all trying to do the best we can to get to a point that makes sense for everybody. So with that being said, I'm going to go back to what we're doing here. Yes, Hunter?
For everyone who's here, it should be noted that, so the subcommittee was formed by the Board of Health to basically sift these things out. The only problem is the people who introduced this whole fiasco, unfortunately, have actually resigned from the Board of Health. So it should be noted that the ideas were so unpopular, even in discussion mode, that it had to be dealt to a subcommittee, and then people then ran out the back door as far as, standing behind their ideas. So it should be noted, all the information, put forward, even while it's still in the planning stage, it was so unpopular, the people who actually invited this, wasting our time, unfortunately, they still couldn't even stand there and basically ask questions and do all the things necessary to make everyone else feel comfortable. So
The people that-
it should be put before, it should be noted that, at least.
So are you suggesting that the people that recommended a subcommittee resigned and don't stand here?
Resign what?
the people that recommended this subcommittee resigned and they didn't have the courage to come here? Is that what you said?
No, there's no implication.
Yeah.
They
No, I'm just
resigned.
asking you so I understand.
Yeah, they resigned because of the unpopularity of this. And then they dished out the subcommittee. So this is
Oh,
this is all for a recommendation to the Board of Health. Yes.
Yep.
The people on the Board of Health, unfortunately, who introduced this, are no longer with us, or are at least announcing their retirement, so to speak, but they said they will come back, when the heat dies down or whatever. So it should be noted that there's a lot of moving parts here, more so than just a subcommittee.
Yep. So that's beyond what we're tasked to do. For the record, I'm the one that made the recommendation at the Board of Health that maybe they form a subcommittee to get this done. And I by no means did that so I could be sitting here. But I did, since I opened my mouth, I don't run away from anything. No, listen, excuse me.
But you didn't have this idea, it wasn't his idea, the first one.
Allow me to speak. I allowed you to speak.
I'm grateful.
Yeah. So anyways, I'm here trying to do the best I can with it. So is everybody else sitting at the table. So with that all being said, I appreciate your comments. I don't know who you were referring to, but it doesn't really matter to me. That's not why I'm here tonight. But we're going to go back to doing our work, and we're not going to take any more input from the audience tonight because I want to go home at a reasonable time. I'm not going to sit here and banter back and forth.
Well, that's kind of unfair to the people who came here, who are very much opposed to it.
Understand something. This is a subcommittee. I've explained this, which you didn't like what I said on the second meeting. I did check with town council. This isn't a public hearing. This is a subcommittee. You're welcome to be here, but we don't have to recognize and have input to drag this out for the entire night. We're just trying to get the job done.
I wouldn't say it'd be the entire night, but I feel like...
Well, anyways, that's my opinion. So anyways, with that, on the public safety structure...
Well, hold
plan-
on, how about
Yeah.
the exemptions? Are we going to keep it or
Right.
leave it? Strikes?
We have a
So-
question on that whole section, right? So,
Oh, okay.
So I think we should consider, are there going to be exemptions to the density guidelines? And if there are exemptions, what are they? Or if you're saying the shelters, rescues, and sanctuaries that are licensed, since it's a state license and that doesn't necessarily apply, or if you don't think it should apply, then I think we should have a section that addresses shelters, rescues, and sanctuaries if they're going to have a different set of guidelines. I think we can't just blanket them because they are a different set of circumstances.
Well, not really. I mean, we can be greater than,
But like, it's like the kennel analogy. It's in the animal bylaws, which I did read when I was looking for the thing about the swine. It's all about dogs. So it says you can have 3 dogs, and if you have more than 3 dogs, you need a license. So this is a parallel to that. So it says
but it doesn't
these are,
reference MGL
what's
in
that?
the animal control bylaw. It doesn't reference
What does-
state,
what doesn't?
and for
You
kennel.
wanted to reference that? You wanted to reference that? Is that what you're saying? You want to put it in to reference that?
In this, I want no exemptions. Because we want to be better than the state here. That's why we're doing this.
But I'm just saying there are all, like a parallel with the dogs, there are certain,
So
But it's
that are-
town
that are
control.
with the dogs, if you have a kennel license, you pay a lot more. than
Right.
Just licensing your dog.
Right.
So now are these people with shelters and whatnot going to have to pay for permits?
that's a question we could talk about, sure.
I'd say it's an
I-
option of if they want
I-
to get permits.
I think
or
it
if they
should
wanna
be
stay within
addressed.
the guidelines.
It should be addressed one way or another in here, because there are, the shelters, rescues, or sanctuaries in town, or there could be, and people who want to do that need to know how to do that. Whether it's applying for a permit, paying a fee, that should be addressed. We can't just say we're not going to talk about it, because that's, an elephant in the room, or a horse in the room. We have to address it no elephants are on the list, but we have to address it
So are animals.
one way or another. But I'm just making the comparison to the dogs. It's, if, you know, the average person can have 3 dogs, that's like the units. That's like, okay, you can have the 10 units per quarter acre. But if you're doing this other thing, then you can have this number. Or you can pay a fine, like you're saying, a fee to apply, and it's a different process. But I think
But that's more like a stable. You can, like a kennel or a stable. But this is a whole different entity.
Stables aren't addressed in here either.
MDAR is a whole different,
Right, so we could strike that part, and we could write our own about shelters then.
There you
That's what
go.
I'm saying.
And stables is a good point, too.
Stables, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not included, so that's a good idea to include that. So, yeah, so we should think about, you know, in the density guidelines, any exceptions, any exceptional circumstances should be addressed. Stables, I'm going to write stables down. That's a really good idea. Does anyone have any, Linda, do you, or anyone
well,
else on the board?
you'd have to look up a definition of a
houses.
stable, too.
I'm sorry?
Hen houses.
Hen houses?
Hen?
So if, like, for,
I'm just being a jerk. And I said that because you're in the chickens. and-
Oh, well, let's
So
stick
You're worried
to,
about my stables,
you
I'm
know-
worried about your hen house.
no, I'm not worried.
So, no, I
I'm
know
not
that,
worried.
but it's just.
A stable could be a barn, right?
Right.
Place where
A
you
stable would
stable
be
your
multiple
horse.
horses leased.
Correct.
Leased
Stables,
space, boarding
somebody-
horses.
Stable.
Okay, so stables are boarding.
Technically, it's a business at that point, right?
Are there any existing laws that we know of regarding stables?
Oh,
Whether
yeah,
they're
they're out
state
there.
or, so do we just reference the state law, or do we want to redefine a law for the town?
We'd have to look at it.
Okay, I'll make a note. Look
Yeah,
up state.
look up state.
Okay. Do we want to at least look up the MDAR regarding shelters and see if they have any guidelines, and see if we want to modify them from there? I guess it-
Well, look them up
Okay.
and see what they are and see if we, and not modify, look at them or not even use them.
Right,
Right,
and,
so,
and we can write, like I said, we could write our own if we want to, it should, but they
Yeah,
it should
as
be.
I said before, is at the last meeting, the goal isn't here to try to encompass every single thing and make this super complicated with 100 pages, is to establish a baseline that can be modified, okay? Whether it's added to or subtracted from, but something in place.
Right.
That's what my personal goal is to.
But we want
try
to do a thorough job, because making an amendment to a law is a difficult
No,
process.
it's
so-
not a law.
Or,
It's a regulation, and that's done at a Board of Health meeting.
well, we still
So
want to be
bylaw is done
thorough.
at town meeting, a regulation's done at their meeting. No, and that's, we all have our opinion, so you have one and I have one, so, which is fine, that's what we're supposed to do. But I don't want to get overly complicated with it, because I think won't finish the job.
It's just another
But
letter.
let's clean up, before we get too crazy, why don't we clean up this document, go and get back to identify the areas that we have questions on, right? So that way we don't spend a lot of time on it. We have some
That's-
things we want to look up,
That's,
right?
yep, that's what we're
And
doing. We
then
made
we'll-
a
and then We'll
note.
just move through it.
So are we good with number 5 then, everyone? Okay, we have things to look up on 5.
Yeah, we
yep.
have things to go back to.
Let's move on to number 6, public safety. Do you want to read it, Mike?
No, if you go on and run the meeting, go for it. That's normally the chairman's position, but.
No, go ahead.
No, you're going to do it.
No.
You want to take it, go for it. Number 6.
Okay. Public safety, A, structure placement. Livestock shelters must be a minimum distance from property lines in according with zoning laws.
Perfect.
Any objections?
That's a given.
Good. B, enclosures and fencing. Owners must make a reasonable effort to confine livestock except when free-ranging under direct supervision or is permitted, and I wrote a question for us, should it be permitted, such as on properties over 5 acres, so long as they are not creating a nuisance or a hazard, such as wandering onto roads or neighboring properties. So that's just a question, should free-ranging be permitted under certain circumstances?
What particular animals you talking about?
Well, yeah, it's
Yeah.
kind of
No, let me get that.
Well, it also says under direct supervision.
Yeah.
Right, which I don't like at all. 'cause
But what type of animals are you
direct
thinking?
supervision when you're free-ranging animals.
I didn't have any in mind. I was thinking more of
Because if
where,
free range is his,
well, say you have 5 acres with, say you have 5 acres with a low-lying stone wall, that you're not going to erect a giant fence on 5 acres, and you have cattle, and one could potentially step over the wall, wander through the woods to their neighbor's house. So is that,
I've heard it happening before.
They will
Is that-
be 5 feet
Right.
over a fence.
right, is that an exception to the fencing? So under, I just always try to, like, I write the rule, and then I try to think, okay, are there problems to that? Are there exceptions?
The fence has to be high enough and it has to have a good enough jolt, right?
So,
Well, yeah,
Well, then that's not free ranging.
right. I think the whole
So-
free-ranging thing.
You can't free range, there's not
So-
enough room.
I think you combine two things into one section.
Yeah.
Free ranging and
It
fencing?
takes- Under French, enclosures and fencing, it should be just a pretty straightforward, owners must make a reasonable effort to confine the livestock, right? Not
Okay.
Yeah.
accept.
Okay.
Skip that part of it,
So
So get-
strike from accept on,
right?
we'll
You can
strike all
take
of
that and put it into its own thing if you want to address free ranging, which is fine, you can do that.
Okay,
That way, if Linda gets 600 chickens and she decides to free range them and they're running all the way over to Chris's house, then they have
Right.
something to enforce, right?
And
So it's not
Yeah.
it wouldn't be out of control to identify free ranging like that.
And and if we did add it somewhere on properties over 5 acres, well, that makes neither here nor there, because I could free range my horse right on the front lawn, and I've got 10 acres.
right,
But he could easily get out and car hits him, and
exactly, right. So
people get killed in the car, so.
would we like to include a section on free ranging and how to define that, or when
Maybe
it's,
to make an exemption for like chickens or something if you wanted to, like.
right? Is that something anyone has any
Yeah.
feelings or thoughts about?
So we could
free-ranging?
look
Kind of
up
poultry,
free ranging.
You can free range relatively safe.
Right.
I mean, the coyotes and fox will get them, but
Right.
Yeah, they'll free
But they
range
might-
for a couple minutes.
They might get in your neighbor's yard and dig up their garden, which happens with my neighbors, and they were not happy. So we confine ours, but,
But you can leave that like under the supervision thing in there.
right. So free ranging under supervision, or how would we like to describe free ranging?
How would you describe the supervision part?
Right, exactly.
yeah, it's not like you can call them and they come back.
No.
Doesn't happen.
Not unless it's dark out.
So for the wording about free ranging, do we want to permit free ranging? Because I've seen most of the laws only mention fencing, and a reasonable effort must be made for fencing. They didn't really say free ranging is allowed under these conditions. So I don't know if we want to define those conditions,
Well,
or,
Places,
Is there anything in here that covers nuisance?
yes, the very next.
So if it covers nuisance,
Okay.
then you don't have to worry about
Let's
free range.
let's skip over free ranging for now and move ahead.
I'll finish what I was saying. So
Okay.
if you're covered in, nuisance is covered in here, and you decide you're going to free range your chickens, and they're coming over and harassing me all the time, that's a nuisance. That's already covered under this section. I don't think we have to put in another section for free ranging.
Okay.
That just comes with logic. Everybody will let their chickens out, run around. I did once, and then the coyote swiped one, and then I couldn't let them out no more, but anyways.
Okay. So striking free ranging then? No addressing it?
Does everybody feel
No,
about?
I think he's right. It'll come under a nuisance.
Yeah.
It's, if you've got proper fencing, they're not going to.
Okay. No free ranging in here. Moving on to the next one, C, noise, odor, and pest management. Owners must make reasonable efforts to minimize offensive noise, odors, and pests, which may require lowercase I, manure management plan, see section 7, lowercase ii, feed plan such as proper storage and storage of feed in enclosed containers as to prevent access by pests or spoilage by elements. III, noise mitigation, such as roosters must be enclosed in a coop of solid construction, non-mesh or screen walls between the hours of 10 p.m. and 7 a.m. IV, pests management plan, such as use of environmentally safe pesticides, rodenticides, and/or traps, and proper storage of feed in enclosed containers. Does anyone have any feedback, questions, objections?
The III, and for the record, I don't have a rooster. I don't even have chickens anymore. But roosters must be kept in an enclosed coop of solid construction between 10 p.m. and 7 a.m. Well, they go in when it's dark, and they want to come out when it's light. Okay?
Right.
And roosters don't have a watch. So even if you got them inside, they
Yeah,
feel like
that's-
it, they're going to make
Mine
noise.
still throw out my
Right.
headlights when I came home
Right.
at 2 a.m.
Right, so, well, in this case, it would be the owner's responsibility to lock them in, which I
Yep.
do with my chickens. I shut the
Yep.
door, I don't let them out till after 7 a.m., because I
Yep.
want to help my neighbors get some sleep.
Yeah, 'cause roosters are tough.
Yeah, roosters are a tough one.
Yeah,
That's your noise nuisance right there.
because I had seen some
So-
that just said at night, must be
Right.
confined at night, so,
I think some of this it keeps going back, in my mind, it keeps going back to the density thing.
Yeah.
We have to
Right.
have
Depending on where it is.
some sort of understanding what people are thinking as far as density, right? So a rooster on your lot is totally different than the one on the camp meeting room, right? You can have 20 of them up there, nobody would know it. So I think we need to think about that anyways and consider it.
right. So how would we like to address that? I
I
think
put a question mark next to it, and I'm going to think about it between now and our next meeting, and see
Okay.
if I can think of something, and if anybody else has any ideas, it would be appreciated if they could come up with them.
Give your
For
neighbors
next
eggs
time.
so they don't complain.
Right, that's, I also did that. That was a,
It's hard when they wake them up at 2 a.m. I don't know if things are going to cover it.
so we want to just think of that and come back to that next time?
Yeah, that's a
Yep.
tough one there.
Yep.
I had some ideas. I think last time I shared an idea about being a certain number of feet from the nearest neighboring
Yeah.
dwelling.
See, roosters, I don't care. You could have one right next to my house. It wouldn't bother me at all.
Well, yeah.
Right, well,
A lot of people
that's the thing.
don't.
Certain people
That's right.
like them, certain people don't.
That's right.
I have people who
I
walk
won't-
by.
I won't mention them by name, but somebody that runs the town meetings doesn't like roosters.
I think we all know who that is. But I have folks who walk by and they're like, I love your rooster.
I never realized how loud donkeys were until my neighbor got some. And I was sitting on my porch saying, what is that noise?
Yep.
I walked down to my barn, I knew what it was. I could tell right away,
Right,
but they just make me laugh.
Horses can be very loud, too.
right.
6 a.m.
Oh, yeah.
I was
They want their
late with
breakfast.
his breakfast. You could hear it a mile away.
Talk about a clock.
Yeah.
Right. The noise mitigation is kind of like the fencing. It's just sort of like, make a reasonable effort to not,
Well,
but,
shut that
but
donkey
do we want to include other animals? And do we want to call out other animals in the noise clause and
They-
address
they
that in
can
some
be.
way?
It depends on density.
Right,
Again, that's what he said, density too.
right. So I was thinking
It could be
the,
any animal can be a noise nuisance.
right,
Whereas
exactly,
all my neighbors loved it.
right.
Well,
I said, gee, does it bother you? Oh, no, that's why we moved here, because it's out in the country.
Right, right. Like, I love the sound of a rooster crow, but that's me, everyone's
They
different.
love
Some
the-
people love the sound of their horses.
That's right.
It's different, but I think my suggestion would be the easiest way would be a number of feet from the nearest dwelling, because that kind of takes
That
care of
doesn't stop
itself.
the noise.
But no, I'm just saying, we could suggest, you're talking about density, how to define that. You could say if your animal can't be more than 100 feet from the nearest dwelling, they're obviously going to be very loud. So would that be a way to address
sound carries.
I don't know, my neighbor had peacocks and they were 1,000 feet away.
Oh, my
and I
God.
did
Right.
Those things like that right next door.
Right?
Oh, Peacocks isn't in here, so.
So feet, a number of feet won't help.
That was covered in.
No.
Right, peacocks are extremely loud.
Yeah.
I would argue louder than roosters.
Yeah, I had a peacock, I didn't even know the noise they
No.
made until like after I had it.
It's quite extraordinary.
So, yeah, I think your noise
To run with the
is gonna
turkeys.
include.
Yeah, you remember that one a couple years back?
The funniest thing you ever
Although
saw.
we're
All the turkeys come through and one peacock's with them.
So more research on noise.
That peacock decided he
Yeah,
wanted
let's
to
do-
display those turkeys beat the shit out of him.
Let's do a little research on noise. Maybe we
Yep.
can look up what other towns, how they've addressed that, whether it's a number of feet or,
The
and
biggest
including
one with
other
roosters
animals.
is they don't allow them anywhere.
Yeah.
Most towns don't
That's-
allow them in
Yes,
residential areas.
some
Banned in
towns.
Uxbridge.
Totally.
Right.
Which is wrong, but.
Well, I, for one,
That's wrong.
would like to not live, I would like to not live in a town where that is a thing.
Yeah, their
Because-
plan is not.
No.
Yeah, other towns are a lot more restrictive. So we'll come back to the noise. Any other sections in here? Is there any other comments on any of the other
Section 4.
parts of section C, I, IV?
The pest management,
Oh,
Pest?
number 4 under C.
Okay,
Right. So I would see if we have any current regulations under there. There might be something already in there. See what that is.
okay,
And that's one of those that's pretty much your own benefit to take care of,
right.
so.
They're a bunch of cats, don't feed them.
No one wants pests, including the animal owners.
Stray cats.
Yeah, I know, they drop them off all the time.
oh, yeah.
They used to at my house, just because I had one horse.
They eat the rats. They're outside.
I don't complain.
Mike, do
No,
you
the
think
cats
if
don't.
if I messaged Kristen, would she be able to help with, if I
Yeah.
can't find the
Yeah.
laws that we're
Yep.
trying to reference?
Yeah, anything that you're
Okay.
looking, just send her an email and she'll
Okay,
get it for you.
that would make things easier. The website isn't exactly
Yeah,
easy to
The
search.
Mass General laws, I don't know, I mean, you can ask her about them, but that'd be something that we'll probably have to look up and see what it says, because you're referencing something they don't have already
Right.
in their system.
Like if somebody's got a bunch of trash in their yard and it's got rats, I would think Board of Health would have something,
Yeah, we don't have that in here.
yeah. But Board of Health might already have something on their books.
On
For
pests.
pests.
Right. So manure and waste management. Storage manure must be positioned away from proper distance from wetlands and water resources. That would be covered under conservation. That's already,
Read that.
that's already regulated because of wetlands.
Is there a law to reference, or,
Conservation
310
by it.
CMR and the Douglas Wetland Bylaw.
okay.
I'm going to have to look and see what B is. In accordance with DEP and USDA guidelines, removal or composting of manure. So I don't know what those guidelines are, so I'll have to look and see what they are before I could comment either way. Runoff prevention. Normally, I would say you already covered that under A, but because they had an incident a couple of years ago with a property owner that had a bunch of pigs, and they're rooting animals, so they destroyed the land and everything ran down and actually contaminated the neighbor's well. So I don't know if the wording is what we want in there, but something we'll look at. I put a question mark next to it just so I can do a little more research and provide some information if possible.
And it pretty much should include something like runoff shall never leave the owner's property, like going onto somebody else's property, not just storm drains, wells or water bodies.
Okay. I'll add and
It should be
neighboring.
contained on the owner's property.
I'll add and neighboring property.
The D, setback from property line must maintain a distance of, a recommended distance from property line. Again, I keep going back to the density thing, because it's all going to be relative, right? The distance to your property line from the middle of your lot is totally different than the distance from the middle of mine or Buzz's. So I think we need to look at that a little bit further and see what it is. And it's going to make a difference if we get to a point where we make a recommendation about density as to what type of animals that are on there. It's not going to matter, for argument's sake, if it's a quarter acre and you can't have cows there, it's not going to matter where the cow waste is, right? So it's something, I think we got to get that density thing figured out so we can look at it as an individual thing and see what makes sense. What I stockpile for manure isn't the same as what you would with your 11 hens. After that, you need a permit, remember? No. But realistically, what you generate with a horse or a cow doesn't even begin to be the same as what you would have with a chicken.
It's the beauty of
Right.
horses, they produce more than they eat.
Yeah, the money goes in one end and right out the other end. Anybody have any opinion on that as far as looking at the density before we start even thinking about compost piles?
I don't really understand how that would be worded.
Yeah, I don't either.
In terms of the distance of the manure from the neighboring property.
Because we don't know what we're talking about. What type of compost, and so, and that's going to be generated by what is recommended to be on
Okay.
a particular size property.
Plus, no lots out there are completely square. Some lots are just long and narrow.
Right, right.
And then they get skinny in the middle and then bigger on the
Right.
But
end.
it's important to consider the lot size. I'm going to use Walm Lake as a reference again. I did it at a previous meeting, that even though they're 90,000 square foot zoning with 200 feet of road frontage, those lots are 5,000 square feet. They're 50 by 100 lots. Made prior to zoning, which was in 1970. They were made in the 50s. So we got to think about that density thing. I think that's going to be an important piece of this, as to
I think it's the hardest part to figure out of it. Because you have different people.
Like with her horse, she kept it clean all the time.
right.
It's hard to, if you have too many animals on that area, to keep it clean.
Yeah.
So density becomes a big factor.
But again, this isn't I don't believe it's a policing thing. And one could argue that
Right.
it could become a policing thing, right?
Right.
It could.
It could be a vendetta and all this other nonsense that could come along with it, right? I beat you in the election, so you don't like me, so you're going to pick on my horse, right? That stuff happens. It's real life,
Don't worry
right?
about it.
No, but it's real life. That stuff happens, right? So
Right. But we're,
the idea is just to come up with some sort of guidelines, so then if there is an actual valid complaint, then the Board of Health has something that they can refer to address it. Right now, they have nothing. Say, yeah, well, yep, you complain, yep, mm-hmm.
that's
And
in here
and that's been the
further in.
problem. Yep.
For 7D, with the manure recommended distance from the property line, I don't think to me, it doesn't seem to matter about the density or the lot size, because if you have a 2-acre lot and you're going to plop your manure 2 feet from your neighbor's house, or if you have a quarter-acre lot and you're going to plop your manure 2 feet, you should still say, hey, no, it's got to be 25 feet at least. That's all that 7D is about. I don't think it really, the density really applies.
If you have a rabbit and you decide to clean out its coop and you got a 5-gallon bucket of manure and you put that 2 feet from your property line, nobody's even going to pay attention.
Or notice.
But if he takes and moves his manure pile 2 feet from the property line, you're going to notice.
Right. So how do we want to word it then? How do we want to address
Again,
it?
I think it comes back to density. We got to figure out what we're talking about, right?
But that's kind of taken care of by the LUs, because folks on a small-sized lot are only ever going to have either 1 goat or 10 chickens. You're not going to have a cow. So it takes care of itself in a sense.
So the same consideration for that 5-gallon bucket of rabbit manure should be the same as a pile of manure from a half dozen cows?
I don't know. That's the question. That's what we're discussing.
It comes back to the density thing, because if you're not familiar with how much they'll generate, you need to look at it.
Oh, we only know our own experiences,
Well,
so
that's what
I
I'm
don't
saying.
have
So,
cows.
Yep.
We have 5 wheelbarrows to load a day.
Right. So does anyone have any suggestions for how to address the distance, or?
I'd say we need to look at what other towns do. I've seen on several different regulations, some were 50 feet, some were 25. So it all depends on what we recommend and why.
Right.
So we go back to Walmart, it's 50 by 100 lot. You say I'm 50 feet, so now I can't be on that side of the lot because I'm 50 feet from that one. I can't go on this side of the lot. But where do I put it? Right? So I still think it goes back to density. And we got to figure out that portion of it, and then we're going to have finish this conversation. I don't think you can do that without the other. That's my thought.
I disagree, but.
Okay, no, that's fine.
So how about if you're spreading it? Now, I spread it on my fields, it's going right to the lot line.
That's a great question.
Right.
Right,
You can't spread manure, it's organic fertilizer.
right. So maybe that shouldn't even be in here then, a
No.
setback.
It shouldn't even be
No.
in there. People should be reasonable. And
Right.
that, your neighbor's going to complain if you have it on the line.
Right.
You already captured it in section 6 under noise,
Odor.
odor,
Odor
and
and
pest
Oh, yeah,
management.
Okay.
My neighbors kept asking me to buy mine. My horse manure.
Some
You got
people
that number?
want
I
it.
got some also.
So that was like gold.
So Buzz,
There's
we
probably a half dozen people in this room that would do it too.
Buzz is suggesting we strike 7D setback.
I recommend it.
Okay,
Yeah.
let's do that.
If you're right on your neighbor's line, they're going to complain about it.
Right,
And that's where
right. And you're right, Mike, that's covered under C.
noise and odor.
Right, 6C.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
And where we are, we could put it, the trees aren't going to yell at me, so.
Right. Grandfathering, a property owner may maintain existing livestock for the natural life of the animals and may reintroduce similar animals in a pre-existing facilities, bonds, or shelters that are previously used to house livestock owned by the current property owner, provided the owner continues to reside in the property.
That's exactly what we said,
Yeah, I like that.
word for word.
So if somebody has a stable on their property, they're leasing the space for the animals, or the animal itself. And somebody comes along and wants, you want to buy my property. So now you can't use it as a stable because I'm not the existing owner, even though it's been running and without any issues.
It doesn't say that you can't use it. It's only,
Yeah, oh, yes.
I would think this would be, grandfathering would be what this, a property that does not conform.
that's correct.
It says, provided the owner,
LU.
provided, and you can use that, it doesn't conform, but it's been operating. Buzz has had his horse stable for the last 40 years. He has no problem. He's only got 2 acres of land, but he's had no problem because he manages it properly. He decides he wants to retire and move down south. Why, I don't know, but he wants to go there. Somebody comes along and wants to buy it. They can't buy that and use it because it doesn't fit, because he's not, according to this, he's not the current property owner that continues to reside on the property.
But that
The
was,
gray
what-
area.
that was when I had said, I've only got an acre, I wouldn't be allowed to have a horse anymore, even though I've still got the stall, the fencing, everything's still there. And that's where the grandfathering would come in. If you're below, your size of acreage is below what is allowed by the new regulation.
That's correct.
But if I sold my property, my 1 acre, the new person couldn't have a horse there,
Right.
which I was fine with.
You were fine because you were
But-
moving, but I don't know.
The new person wouldn't be fine,
But
right?
what you guys are talking about are like stables. I mean, somebody who rents out stalls, that's different.
Let me use your property for an example then. You have a 1 acre lot, you have your house on there, you have a small barn, you have a fenced-in paddock, right? If you properly manage it, you could have a couple of horses on there without an issue, I would think, right?
Well, according to this, I can
Wait
have
a
one
minute.
horse.
No, but wait a minute, right? So now that you no longer have a horse and you decide you like where he's moving to, so you're gonna move south too. Your house isn't, you have a barn, you have a fence and everything else, that's useless. Were you supposed to
It's
tear
useless
it
to the
down?
person buying it to have a horse there.
Right, so
because
how you gonna sell it?
they're- Sell it as a house.
Okay, all right. Yeah, you're
I'm
missing
not
what I'm
selling
saying.
the
But
yeah.
if somebody who
barn.
buys it is
Right.
going to want to
Right.
put a horse there.
That's
Maybe
right.
not.
That's the attractiveness
Yeah,
of your
they're gonna
property,
assume they can put a
is to be able to have it.
I understand what you're saying, Mike. Are you suggesting that we strike the, starting at owned by the current property owner, provided the owner continues to reside? So that way it would say, property owners may maintain existing livestock for the natural life of the animals and may reintroduce similar animals into pre-existing facilities, barns, or shelters that were previously used to house livestock, period. So that way a new owner can put a horse in there.
Right. Yeah, so owned forward, take that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Say that again?
We're
So use the house livestock, period. Everything past it goes away.
Well, that was like Buzz talked about it last time. There is some stuff downtown that used to be a barn in the 1800s. Does that mean somebody's buying it can now put a horse in there, even though it's an eighth of an acre? Right? We talked about that, and I agreed that it would be,
Because they're still,
That wouldn't-
barns are all still down there on Main Street.
that's right.
But you
And they
can't-
were all used as...
Carriage sheds.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and to house horses.
I think it goes back to like the common sense thing about the,
It goes,
Well,
it
some
goes back.
people don't have common sense, they think they're
It
going
goes,
to
it
put a
goes
horse
back to
there.
common sense, but if you want to split hairs over it, okay, under zoning after,
was gonna say-
lack of use for 2 years eliminates that use. Okay, so,
No, I don't want to go that route at all.
well, no, I'm just saying, so
Yeah.
you're splitting hairs over this thing.
No, we talked about it last meeting.
No, as like the property owner, say you sold the property, then they have like 2 years to have a horse there and then not. You know?
Sometimes it takes you a while to get over the loss of your animal that you've had for 30
No,
years.
I'm not saying in your case.
Can't find another one, and you do, well, you're 25 months, so you
So you
can't
want to
have
put a
one now.
question mark on that and think about that section?
Yeah, let's think about
I
it.
liked it. As is.
yeah, because it covers you right now. That's why.
And that new people buying it would not be able to do it under this regulation.
Yeah, and that's where I don't think it's right either.
Right.
If they were buying it for that purpose, then they should have an amount of time to fulfill that purpose, or,
And who's going to keep track? I mean, you're putting a lot of work on the
so that's
inspector.
where,
Yep.
is it worth us even
That's right.
addressing?
Well, you could say,
Well,
is it
it
worth
is
us
if-
addressing any of this? Because it still all comes down to
Right.
the animal inspector,
worth
no
it
matter
for
what.
animals.
How much work do you want to give them?
So if we had read further, we probably would have answered half of our questions. Because it says, considerations, these allowances shall not apply where such an allowance poses a significant risk to health or safety of the animals, the public, or the environment as determined by the health inspector, the animal inspector, right? So it would have been covered in there anyways. So I still agree with Jessica as far as what Jessica struck out of there is to stop at livestock and take that owned by the current property owner. Then you're not losing any rights of that piece of property. To go back to the 1800s, I think that isn't what we're intending to do.
Right.
The recommended livestock units is to exceed lot size guidelines. The recommended livestock units is to exceed lot size guidelines, section 5.
Where are you?
I'm reading the next page.
Oh, you skipped number 9.
No, he read it.
Oh, okay.
So are we doing 9 now?
Yes.
Yes, we are. Special permit variance. A prospective or current animal owner may apply for a variance, including but not limited to situations where the recommended livestock units is exceeded in a lot guideline, proper setbacks for animal enclosures, barns, coops are not possible due to non-conforming lots and pre-existing non-conforming structures. So that, you don't even have to get into into that part of it because it's covered under zoning, right? Even though the structure under 200 square feet doesn't need a permit, you still have to abide by zoning bylaws, so that would be covered under zoning.
For that, I was more thinking of also neighbors with pre-existing non-conforming structures, like the neighbor's house is close to the lot line, so not only your own.
So somebody could build a barn or a coop 10 feet from the property.
No, this is talking about existing, pre-existing.
Existing?
May apply for a variance. So
Doesn't say existing.
So under your special permit, the variance, the variance, I assume that any variance that would come through this bylaw would be something to do with the animals through the Board of Health. When you get into structures from property setbacks, that's a zoning Board of Appeals thing. And Board of Health has no jurisdiction over that. They couldn't tell you could put your barn 10 feet from the property line in a 25-foot setback. Yours is 15.
But if the reverse, if zoning, ZBA allowed the structure to go within 10 feet,
You could
then
go there.
that coop would be 10 feet from the property line.
Well, zoning would only,
They can only address the structure.
they would only give you, I'm assuming this, variance on a permitted structure. We typically don't get involved, and I haven't seen it since 2013, get involved in variances for coops or things like that. I'm sure it's not out of the question, but it would be extremely unusual for somebody to come
Agricultural
in.
buildings,
Right.
mostly you don't need permits.
Agricultural buildings don't need permits.
Like a barn?
Is that,
Oh, come
is
on.
that written in one of the
Where-
I was told.
Yeah, you were told the wrong thing. It's not in our zoning bylaws that way.
Oh, it's not?
No.
Yeah.
Is that
They're not
something you read
exempt.
in a?
Yeah, the
That's
only,
kind of like a right to farm bylaw thing, I think.
Building
Could be.
inspector stood on the foundation, said, I don't have to be here.
I think that's in like the Massachusetts, like, the.
in which decade?
they have.
Which did.
10 years?
Huh?
But
10 years ago.
whatever
Who was
Douglas
it,
has
Larry?
supersedes that.
Yeah.
No, no, I'm saying, I think that's.
Larry's no longer a building inspector either.
From that.
Not anymore, no.
No.
Building's done, though.
Yeah. Proper setbacks of manure piles as covered in section 7, so that is still under discussion. Proper fencing, containment of livestock, if possible. No,
Is not possible.
oh, is not possible.
That means that if you can't put up a fence or contain your livestock, you can get a special permit of variance?
Yeah.
Is that what that means?
Yes.
I don't know about it.
Yeah, I don't know if we want that in there. I was just trying to, like I said, I write the rule and then try to think of exceptions. So these are all the exceptions.
Right.
These are all things where if you can't, like I had given the example before, you have
Yeah.
a 5-acre lot with a low little fence, that it's not possible to contain your animals, it just isn't. You could apply for a special permit to say, you know what, I want to have cows, then I'm not going to be able to contain them. I live really far from anyone else, the chances of them wandering on a property are very low. What do you guys say? Is that okay? And they'll say, all right, we'll make an exception.
Why would you go for a variance if you live so far away from everybody and nobody would know?
Just so that
I'm just.
Just so you're
asking a
legal and
silly
legit.
question.
You don't have to, but
Right.
like you were saying, the only time
Right.
that an issue comes up is if someone complains.
Yeah.
So,
Well, cows are funny. They can have nothing to eat on the other side of the fence, and that's still where they want to be. And they find a way.
I think we can actually strike point III, because we struck that from section 7 where Buzz had mentioned we're not going to restrict the setbacks of manure piles. We're not going to mention that, so we can strike that.
I would be in favor of striking the next one as well. I don't understand why you would get I have animals and I can't control and contain them, so can I have a variance to have them? That doesn't make logical sense to me.
It
Well,
drives you nuts.
that's free range.
Keep 'em in.
Yeah. A free range
Drives you
permit.
nuts when they don't stay in.
Right. It's a free range permit, basically. Anyone else?
What do you think?
Motion to strike?
I think we can strike it.
I'm
I
fine,
think
I'm
so,
fine
too.
with that.
Board of Health shall review the application of special permit and variance, determine if the permit shall be granted. The process may include one or more of the following inspections by animal inspectors, notification of butters, and public hearing. So if you went for a variance, there would be a public hearing. You would have to notify the abutters, and then, so the only thing that they would probably request is the inspection by the animal inspector.
So with notification of abutters and a public hearing.
Right.
If you went for a variance, it would have to be a public hearing. and
So
you would
it's
have
an
the-
and public hearing.
Should it be and? Because I had written may include one or more. We could outline if it should include all of them. It's up,
Oh,
Yeah.
well, any variance should,
it should
Have-
include.
Process may include.
All of the above.
May
All of the above.
include the following: take one or more of out.
Okay. Changing or to and?
Correct.
Okay.
may include all of the following.
If denied,
Shall include.
appeal to independent hearing officer. So we'll get clarification on that before we put that in there.
Right.
Because it's something that we just talked about as a possibility.
Right, that was from last time.
Yep. Disease prevention and reporting, quarantine.
Isn't that covered by the state?
I had seen that somewhere, and I'm not sure.
I'm going to put any
Thought it was by state.
regs on
I don't know
that
if
with
we
a
even-
question mark and see if we can get some clarity. I just want to read through the next section. Why do we have hours?
Suggested quiet hours. I know those aren't on the books officially. I don't believe Douglas has a noise ordinance. Is that correct?
Oh, there is.
Is there one?
Oh, yeah.
On the laws?
For people that, like, say, a factory create, or they're rock crushing or something.
Right, but
It's so many decibels. And
but between the hours of, and I'm in terms of hours, between 10 PM and 7 AM, I don't believe that exists, but we could look that up. That was why I included it. We could look that up.
I would say complaints related to livestock. You don't have to put EG noise, just leave that
Not
out.
even, to strike the entire parentheses area?
I would say yes.
Well, you could take off, you could leave the word noise in there, take off between
Right.
all the way to M, so then because she's trying to capture the noise, and then she added the hours in between,
Correct.
odor, pest activity, animals leaving the property, related concerns, submitted to the Board of Health, right? And then they do what they need to do.
Good.
And that phrase, at next sentence, upon receipt, the animal inspector shall investigate the matter in a timely manner, has to be better than that.
Has to be
You've gotta
more
give it
defined.
a day. If somebody complains that the animals are in deplorable condition, they're starving, oh, I got to it 2 weeks later. That's not matters, you know, I think it has to be addressed
Defined.
within 3 days. I mean, how do you all feel?
I like the statement, in a timely manner.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah, faster the better.
That's
but-
left up to such,
It is vague,
it could be a month.
right?
Well, if you're paying attention and you're like, I guess you'll put in a second complaint after the.
When you put in 4 and you're not heard,
Yeah.
yeah. They're still working on it, thinking about it, haven't even gone to the place
Well,
yet.
I'm not gonna,
Do
I have
we
no
know
interest
how
in
many
sitting here
animals
saying
are
what they
in
do and
town?
don't do. We're trying to
But I'm
come
in
up with
favor of
regulation,
putting
and
a-
whether or not they do their job is.
You know, within
is a
7
different- a different
days
matter.
or something like that.
I like within 7 days. I have a suggestion, actually, to add complaints and concerns, because you're talking about, Linda, concerns of animal welfare. I think it should be edited to say complaints and concerns.
We have it in there under the parentheses, other related concerns.
Oh, okay. I think I would like to call it out, to make it part of the
The heading.
A. Yep. So A would be complaints and concerns. And also 11 would be complaints, concerns, hearings, and fines. I'd feel more comfortable with that.
Have we moved down to number 1 on 11 yet? In the cases where repeated complaints are filed without evidence of a violation, the Board of Health may call a public hearing to address the ongoing concerns, which means you've got to notify the abutters, and who's going to pay for that? Is it Board of Health? Is it the complainant? Is it the person owning who hasn't been qualified to be in violation, you know? And it says both the complainant and the animal property owner may be requested to attend.
Correct.
So if the property owner doesn't want to show up to his own public hearing,
It's a possibility.
There's no violation.
well,
Right.
they don't know that, and how can, he defend himself or not?
I believe
So
this,
you're leaving
Yeah,
the
so
animal
when
inspector with no
when a
teeth.
complaint comes in and you're going to have a public hearing, it's not a requirement to notify all the abutters. You advertise the public hearing, okay? If you're going for a variance or something like that, then you would notify the abutters. So there wouldn't be any fee to anybody as far as the notifying abutters. Right? So if there's a complaint, this is in a case of repeated complaints are filed without evidence of violation, the Board of Health may call. I don't think they get involved in that. I'm going to pick on Fred for a minute. If I call and I complain about Fred's chickens all the time, which I know he has chickens, and I'm just being a jerk, right? That's not a town thing, the referee. That's a case that Fred can turn around and sue me and take me to court for harassment, right?
Well, then,
I don't think the town should be involved in trying to referee.
so it shouldn't be a public hearing at all. It should be.
I don't think so.
that without evidence, that it becomes a civil matter. It could end at that.
I don't even know why. I would spell out how you would handle complaints.
That's right.
Not, okay, I'm going to finish this.
Go ahead.
How you would handle the complaint coming in, but not follow it through in this whole document. Wow, so if we didn't find anything wrong, then this is what we're going to do and that, right? You're going to have complaints, what the violation is when you get to the next page, right? And that's probably why it'd be a good idea to read through the section before you start commenting on some of these things, right? So I'm going to skip down to II. If a violation is confirmed, then the animal inspector shall report the findings to the Board of Health. The board or animal inspector may take any of the following actions. I would change the order, right? If the animal inspector went out and it was a valid complaint, then they would issue a written warning for the first offense and allow a time period. This here suggests 30 days for corrective action, which is something we talked about at the very beginning. And then if the corrective action couldn't get anywhere, then a public hearing would be held on that. And then after that, the Board of Health could impose a penalty, right? Whether it's $5 a day, $1 a day, nothing, whatever it is that they come up with, right? But that would be up to them. But I would think that the first thing would be, and actually, it doesn't necessarily have to, it would be up to the discretion of the animal inspector to whether or not they issue a complaint. Is Fred's chickens are out of control, they come down, and Fred, can you keep them in the yard? They're out in the street, and people are complaining to the police department and everything. I don't think he needs a written complaint at that point. All right, yeah, I understand. You walk away, you don't do anything at all, and you keep getting calls. You go down there, look, I'm going to have to give you a written complaint. You do it again, then I'm going to have to, whether it's he has the ability to impose a fine or it goes to a public hearing. That's something that the Board of Health will figure out as to how they want to proceed with that. But giving them some outlines as to what potentially you want to suggest for a fine, I think is a good idea. As far as how they want to go through the public hearing process, I think that's something that they should do. I would hope that whoever the animal inspector would go out there and be courteous and treat the person with a little respect and say, look, have a conversation and see if you can come to resolution to the problem before you start getting into documenting complaints and things like that. I just think it would be a good way to go about it.
Would you
But-
suggest adding then a first point that says something about a verbal, rather than having
Yeah,
written warnings,
I would
adding
see-
a verbal?
I would see a verbal up the top. Then the second one be issue a written warning, right, on second offense, maybe. And that's also up to the discretion of the animal officer, right? He doesn't
Correct.
have to jump right to a,
I think, too, it also depends on the severity of the complaint.
yeah,
I mean, somebody's loose chickens is not life or death, maybe for the chickens,
depends on the size of the chicken.
but if somebody's horses
Foghorn
are out in the
Leghorn was pretty
field
big.
just starving in the middle of winter,
Right, of
not,
course.
nothing to eat, and we're allowing 30 days for corrective action, that's a long time for an animal to go without eating anything. You know?
Again, I think that's a totally separate issue. I think that would come under humane conditions, and the SPCA would step in if you had a severe case like that, so.
Well, then we're not calling the town. Somebody just sees that, they don't even, they just go right to the MSPCA.
Right.
Okay.
Should that be,
No.
no, because that's taken care of.
Well,
I
that's what
think
you
it's, I
want.
think it's logic, right?
Logic for who? The complaint person?
Right.
You know, somebody saying, oh my God,
Right.
this horse is out there."
Whether it's the person putting in the complaint, whether it's the Board of Health or the animal inspector. So if the animal inspector comes down and sees that you're just being negligent and not feeding your animal in poor conditions, then I would suspect that they would take some sort of action on it, not just give you a written warning and tell you that they're unhappy with you, right?
Right.
Well, that has to be in here.
I agree with you, with Linda. Just because saying like, oh, that's common sense, then why are we even writing this? Because the density limits are a
Why
common
are we
sense
writing
thing.
this? To come up with a basic bio?
Right, but I'm just, for argument's sake, I'm saying
Yeah.
the density limits, you could say that's common sense too. So I think it should be in here under complaints and concerns. I would say at the end, add a line about, for cruelty concerns, please contact MSPCA immediately. I would say to, I would add
In your
that.
next draft, and we'll talk about it again. And since we're going that far, under your B considerations, I want animal owners added to that statement.
Okay.
You got everybody but the animal owners in there.
I think I intended property owners to mean animal owners, but I see what you're saying. That should be,
Yeah, which property?
Yeah.
right.
It could be
It's
the,
not defined.
So I want animal owners specifically spelled
Okay.
out.
So after property owners, add the
Wherever you-
rights of
Wherever you want to
animal
put it. I would put it
first.
right at the very beginning.
right
Sounds
of animal
good.
owners, animals.
The rights of the animals, animal owners. Okay.
Yeah.
Good call, Mike, thanks.
Again, we go back to the, I don't like brown horses, and Linda's got a brown horse, right? So the animal owners should be considered, because I could just be making a complaint,
Right.
because I can make a complaint, so.
Absolutely. That's what I meant by property owners. I meant the animal owners. Should I strike property owners? Because I put neighboring residents in there also. So-
Yeah, animal owners is better than property, because that's,
Okay.
doesn't say which property. Rights of animal owners.
And this 12 is just a resource, nothing to do with,
That's our wish list.
Basically.
well, just a resource for people that are interested, just so anybody sitting in the room is curious what I'm even referring to. The community resources, agricultural education, workshops encourage participation in farm safety, livestock care, training, 4-H, MDAR, or UMass Extension, whatever that is. What I would like to see versus trying to figure all this stuff out, if there's specific websites or something like that, that you can, just as a resource page, that if somebody's interested in something, then it's just something they can find, right? Not required to use it, but they have something if they're trying to figure out how to deal with the neighbor with a brown horse, they can go on our website and look at it.
That's kind of under B then, because the town of Douglas website could provide links for further reading to other websites? Should that be?
Yeah. If the town website has on it, but if you're talking about 4-H, I don't think the town website has 4-H on it.
No, they could provide a link. They could provide
Douglas have 4-H anymore?
external links.
Do we?
I would just put it in this document if there's one.
Okay, I'll just.
You just create, and we're creating more work for staff to maintain the website.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it is a small ask of them, I mean, or maybe not small, but it is,
That
yes.
and 1,000 other ones
Point,
are all
point
smaller.
B is, yes, is an ask for them to put something on the website for resources. It's up to them whether they think that's a good thing to have.
We already went through the schedule, so we have it. So, Section 1, legal basis, we're going to look at those sections. Section 2, get a copy of the existing pig regulation that we have. Section 3, a job description of the animal inspector, just for reference, so we can see what it is. We by no means set up job descriptions, but we should understand what it is if we're referencing it. Under 5, we're going to think about the density considerations. Under 6, enclosures and fences, we're going to think about that. Under 6C, Section 4, any current regulations for pest management. Under 7, disposal in accordance with DEP and USDA guidelines. We'll try to come up with something so we can have that for next meeting to look at. The runoff prevention measures should be taken to prevent nutrient runoffs in the storm drains, wells, and water bodies. Storm drains covered under the stormwater bylaw that was just passed at the town meeting.
Well, that only goes for certain areas of town.
Yeah, where all the storm drains are.
That's right. So it wouldn't be like for where I am.
Right, okay.
Oh.
And water bodies is covered under conservation. We're still talking about it. All I'm doing is recapping what we said, Linda, so no contention here. Grandfathering, we already talked about that, to strike the owned by current property owners, provided the owner continues to reside in the property. Under 10, disease prevention and reporting, are there any regulations on that? We'll see if there's anything there. Under 11, we have just to think about how that, we want to suggest a structure the violations, whether it's a verbal, written. If everybody's inclined to do it, where we had group of people here. There's some that are very familiar to us, others that we've never seen before. I'd like to open it up for the next 10, 15 minutes, get some input from these people to see if there's any comments. 1 second, Fred. I'll get there. I seen you. See if there's any comments from them that'll be useful for us. Is everybody in agreement with that?
Yes.
Yeah. Go ahead, Fred.
I don't really have a comment.
Just state your name for the minute
Fred,
taker.
Charles Street.
Yeah.
Fred Fontaine,
Yep.
Charles Street.
Yep.
It's not really a comment, it's more of a question, a procedural question. Is this only going to be voted on by is it a regulation? Is it bylaw? Is it only going to be voted on the Board of Health and it's in? Or does it go to the Board of Selectmen?
Okay.
Or does it go to the town meeting?
Okay, so all we are is an advisory. So
understand.
I know, I'm going to answer your question. Let me finish. You asked your question. I was patient enough to hear it. So we're only an advisory subcommittee for the Board of Health.
Yep.
If they choose to make it as a regulation, that's done by the Board of Health. If they choose to make it a bylaw, that's done by town meeting. It's not the Board of Selectmen.
So if the Board of Health chooses,
It's a regulation, if it's a regulation under the Board of Health. Yeah. They're going to have a public hearing
Who
on all that.
decides if it's a regulation or a bylaw?
The Board of Health.
Okay, so they could choose on their own to make it.
Yeah, if you wanted to make it a bylaw, you get, I think it's 200 signatures, you could go to town meeting with it, you can get put on the warrant. But I believe it's going to be a regulation, I believe it's going to be a
Yeah, I think
regulation.
it should go to the town because this won't get voted in. That's a comment, I'm sorry.
Yep,
Very truthful one.
yeah, just be recognized, Hunter, if you want to speak.
Not the board I'm talking to, but yeah.
No, you're talking in a meeting, and for the minute taker, they can't keep track of who's speaking when, so just out of courtesy and for the meeting, if you want to speak, I'm more than happy to recognize you. You just have to state who you are, your address, and if you want to comment, but we're not going to have back and forth in the audience. If you want to do that, you need to go out in the hallway. This is a hearing. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Allie Reeves. I live on U Street.
Yep.
Trying to word this correctly. I'm sort of sitting here and I'm listening to all of these regulations that we're looking to put into place, but what I'm not hearing is that when we talk about not allowing animals to have a voice or free range, has anyone consulted or care medically what that does to the animals?
Yep, well, first of all, this is our 4th meeting that we're in. We're just starting to get into this, and we're trying to get a basic format that's getting into that. But to answer your question, we haven't consulted with the animals to find out how they feel about it.
I meant a veterinarian, a
Yeah.
licensed veterinarian that
Yep.
can probably speak to the welfare of the animals. So,
Everybody sitting on this is either currently or has owned animals. They're passionate about it, and just as you are and everybody else is sitting in the audience for different reasons. We're trying to do the best we can with it. So everything that you heard tonight is in the final draft of what we're coming up with. We're trying to get to a place where we have something we can work with. So that's why we started with that document when we first came in and just went through it one at a time to figure out where we have questions. We have to come up with something, but we're not making the decision. What we're going to do is make a recommendation of what we find and give it to the town, so.
I just think about animals and things that they thrive on. And it sounds like some of the things we're trying to not give them, and the concern is, and I am not concerned for my own property based on my size and my animal. Like, I'm not, but I'm also trying to advocate for those who want to keep their animals and not have to, not have them. And you talk about putting roosters, lock them up at 10 and let them out at 7. Well, they're still screaming at 2 a.m. So, that's just a hard thing to swallow. I know originally there was talk about not even allowing roosters, so I'm thankful that that's in consideration to keep, as long as they're sort of confined and not screaming in your neighbor's window. But not allowing certain animals to free range.
Did you read the original draft?
I did.
Okay. That's why we are here.
Changing it. No, I
Because
understand.
that is unacceptable.
That's scary.
None of us want that. We have to come up with something that everybody's going to agree on.
And even the best fencing
Right.
Right.
Yeah, and what you just said about the rooster, you basically echoed what I had said
Yeah.
about it, right? First of all, roosters don't have a watch, right? So it depends on their mood as to when they're going to make noise, or something startles them and they just start making. You good?
Thank you.
All right, Dallas?
Dallas, hi everybody.
U Street?
Yes.
Okay.
So I want to ask, why did you choose the 5 acres? Was that just like looking at the old tax law for the state, or was that any particular reason on the 5 acres?
We haven't chosen anything, so this is, out of all the conversations we've had out of the 3 meetings, Jessica's trying to put it onto a piece of paper, so it's just a starting point. So, so I didn't choose 5 acres, and I'm not gravitating towards 5 acres because I exceeded. That has nothing to do with it. I think she just captured what was said and just trying to start with a guideline as to what to go on. So we're not targeting 1.5 or 2.1 acres or anything like that.
No, I completely understand.
Yep.
I just wanted to know if it was because of old tax law, because, you
No.
know, I don't know what you researched for that. But
I don't think there was any motivation behind it. It was just trying to figure out a point in which you can stop. I'll get to you in a second. A point in which you can stop the regulation, I guess, for a lack of a better description.
Right. I think it might have been the last meeting, like 10 acres was thrown out. I did, read a different state and town laws, and I tried to be a little more generous, so I just went with 5, but it's just a guideline, like that doesn't have to stay if other folks have other ideas that we decide to change it. I just kind of put it in there as a starting point, a talking point.
Yeah, for sure. No, I'm not trying to be contentious about it. Just, most with the property sizes here, 2 acres makes a lot more sense.
Right.
Starting point for that. That protects a lot more, and just, I think there'll be a lot less backlash if this does go through.
I think a lot of those will get answered as we get more into this density thing. I keep using that same example of the village residential, right? But that's realistic. It depends where it actually is in relationship to other properties before you can make a determination. You could have a 3/4 acre lot, but you could be way down the other end of Southeast Main Street, and the only abutter is 500 acres, right? So it really matters about the density. I think it matters about the density, but the group will tell me if I'm right or wrong at the end of the day. You good?
Angela, Northwest Main Street. I just wanted to second the 2 acre to 4 acre grouping of people in town that have more animals than these units are allowing by far, but are keeping them better than maybe some of the other unit sizes in smaller areas. I'd just like to recommend starting that no restrictions over 2 acres to encompass more of the people that are out here and trying to just keep their animals how they're keeping their animals, which hasn't been a problem. I know 5 acres and above, that's a lot more room, but some of us have been very clever with 2 to 5 acres. So I'd just like to recommend 2 acres be considered.
So you live on a cul-de-sac with 8 houses, all have 2 acres, and one guy decides he's going to have a farm on it? Are you going to be happy?
I work at lots of farms that are at the end of cul-de-sacs.
She's the wrong one to ask.
Not a single person that's visited my farm has realized the acreage size. It looks twice the size as it is. And I have lots of clients that have horses on the end of cul-de-sacs.
And how happy are their
Very
neighbors?
surprised at how many are there and have had no neighbor complaints. Not in this town, but you got to look at it from all sides.
That's what we're trying to do, actually.
Yeah.
You've been here since day one, so I think you're getting a feel for how we're trying to go about this thing. It's not an easy process. It's a very difficult process, and they try to be fair across the board.
Our zoning does not
Excuse
address
me.
animals.
Darlene, don't have side content, because the minute taker can't pick up 2 conversations. So that's not to be rude to stop somebody like that. It's just, there is a minute taker that takes the minutes off of recordings, and they just can't do it if there's 2 different conversations going on. Anything else?
Yep.
No.
Thank you.
Anybody else have anything? No. Anything you wanted to add before I
No,
rudely
I'm
cut
questioning
you
our
off?
zoning.
Yeah.
How is it zoned in this town? Like, is it residential village?
As what?
You have,
Does it designate?
7, yeah. Like there's 7 different zoning
Right.
areas.
well, the only ones we'd really be concerned about is RC, RA, and village residential.
Right.
You're not going to have village business. I doubt very much you're going to have anything there. What do you're village residential, right? You don't know? Yeah. I'm not sure about Fred's. He's down on Charles Street. He could, I don't know if village business goes over there, so that, but it's a residential use in village business. So I think it's more getting, I keep saying it, back to the density thing versus the zoning issue, right? You have, I know a woman that lives on Davis Street, a residential house right across from the Trump building there. That's commercial. But it's a residential house. Should she not be able to have chickens in her backyard? Right? I think she should be able to have chickens in her backyard. That's my own personal opinion. But that's what I don't want to do, is restrict people from having things.
Right. The 5 acres was about no restrictions. I was trying to give freedom, but I see the point being made about that does limit folks who don't have the 5 acres. So it definitely could be considered to say no restrictions over 2, or we could, like you're saying, say no restrictions over 2 based on density or based on zoning, or
Until you figure it out, the density, it's kind of hard to say what you can restrict and what you can't.
right.
You could have 100 acres, but it's only 2 feet wide and it goes for 6 miles. Right? But,
Right.
Like the sleds.
you just have.
Right, it's just so hard to define.
I think the density is going to answer a lot of the questions and try to help everybody, whether it's sitting at this table or in the audience, get their head around what we got to address, right? Your property is the one up on Northwest Main Street on the right-hand side. I don't see anybody having a problem with what you're doing up there. I go by it every time I go to Market Basket. Right? So, but again, it comes down to density, right? Your 2 acres would be totally different than 2 acres on A Street. There is not 2 acres on A Street anywhere, but if you were on A Street, 2 acres there would be totally different than your 2 acres.
I guess it's that.
So
that math.
I think that's what we got to figure out, that density thing, and then that's where all this other stuff will start fitting in, whether it's, we're talking about manure piles or whatever it is. Yes?
Jesse Halter on New Street.
Yep.
I had a little question about, it looks like there's 2 different avenues being proposed, essentially for, there's concern about grandfathering, and I wasn't sure what that applies to, if that applies for anyone that currently thinks, or is that only for, non-compliant things, or if there are restrictions on that? Then you also have another avenue set up, going for a permit for if you don't comply. Are they conflicting, or does that?
Don't know. That's why we have question marks.
Limitations would be on those.
Yeah, we have question marks on those to try to get our head around as to how to address that. What is in there that you can't get around is under I gotta find it now that I stuck it in the middle of the paper, but I want to make sure that I say it as it's written, so it's not my words, it's whatever's on this piece of paper. 529. It's under 6, which is public safety. Under, you got structure placement, enclosure, fencing, noise, odor, and pest management, right? So whether it's grandfathered or not, if there's an issue on that, and that's what's going to happen with the density, right? Whether it's noise, odor, or pest management, it's going to happen on the really dense lots, right? And that's where some consideration should be given to that, to make sure that we think about it and make a recommendation as to what you could keep on there. I understand and I appreciate the efforts that you did, Jessica, in that. The question I have is when I get the 10 units, right? Because we're not identifying what's reasonable to have on a quarter-acre lot as far as what type of animal, right? You could have an alpaca, a goat, a sheep, a miniature horse, or a llama. So to this woman's point in the front, that's not fair to the animal because they're not solitary creatures. I said it at the last meeting of the meeting before. I was talking to my neighbor, which just recently moved here from Sweden, and it is illegal to have a single horse on your property. Because they should be at least in pairs. They need companionship. So that comes under the consideration of the animal. So to that woman's point, I get lazy and sit back. To that woman's point, we should consider the animals. We don't have to have a psychiatric session with them, but we could consider their needs and make sure that we think of it that way. Right? So.
That's an interesting
Just a
point.
thought.
That's an interesting point.
But if I could add to that.
Yep.
I had a single horse on my 1 acre of land, rode him every day, rode with other people, one horse. He lived to be 34. Got him when he was 7, so I don't think he was mistreated by being a single horse. And I told you at the other meetings,
Nope.
I had a horse there for 2 days. He did not want to share. He was going to kill this other horse.
Yeah. But that's a unique situation, right? Similar to,
Is it?
I forget names, but
Each
similar to
person has
Angela,
a unique situation.
what she has on her side of her lot, she's managing it properly, it's not an issue.
But
You give somebody else 10 acres of land and give them 2 horses and they wouldn't know what
No, but I
what
thought
to
you
do
were
with it.
saying like you wanted to have it that you must have 2 of one animal.
It's a consideration when you get into,
And
when
the
you're starting to
reasoning
think about
behind
this, right? That's all.
That's what has to be in there.
Yep. Yes, Dallas?
In a way to circumvent the issue with the units, limitations, the density, what if it was focused solely on management? I've been to plenty of farms that have a single animal that don't manage anything. It doesn't matter how much land they had, it would be atrocious. Been to other people's farms, including Angela's, that are immaculate. So if the issue is more focused on management, then you get rid of a lot of the issues that you're going back and forth on. Because obviously, if somebody's not managing it well, it doesn't matter how many animals they have. But for those of us who spend hours a day cleaning and trying to keep manure away and doing the best for the animals, that's a way, an avenue that can be taken to make this a lot more simple, a lot less restrictive, and a lot less time consuming.
A thought came up as she was speaking, my mind spins at the same time, is I don't know if it's possible to do it this way, but it's a thought.
That's where I was going with that other,
What's that?
with the other thing that I printed out.
Oh, the right to farm thing?
Yeah, but it's just
Yeah.
like a, it's not the same one that the state has. It's just,
Well, I'm thinking of this document that we're suggesting is to, I guess, you could classify it as a mission statement, right? At the very beginning, what the intentions are. And a lot of bylaws and regulations are made, and a lot of people don't understand what the original intention was to create that. Maybe if we had something at the very beginning of it to identify what the purpose of this is. And this isn't for everybody that's responsible. This is for when there's an issue that there's a way to address it. Right now, there's no way to address anything. And my concern is it grows too big and it gets it just gets out of control with it. But there needs to be some sort of guidelines so you can address issues, right? So I think it's something we should think about, and when we come to the next meeting, just mull it all in your head and see if it's what direction we should be going in it. We're moving along, we're moving the goal forward, but I am concerned that we over-regulate. It's not a good thing, right? I would rather, like I said a few times already, but I would like to start with a basic guideline that could always be added to if needed to be, right? I'm not saying and suggesting in any way to eliminate any particular part. I'm just saying just a general statement. To come out with something, my intentions, and I don't think anybody here has anything different, isn't to hurt anybody or offend anybody or anything, is to try to come up with a way to give the Board of Health some sort of guidance as to how they can address issues that come forward. Even if it said that you can have 10 chickens on your lot and you decide to have 20 chickens and you don't have a problem, I don't see where you would have an issue, right? No different than building code says you can't build within 25 feet of your property line in an RA2 zone, but if I put a shed on the edge of my property and nobody says anything, nobody's going to come over there and run in my yard and say I have a shed, right? It's only when it becomes a problem. It's something that can be addressed, and how do you deal with that issue?
Right.
So, I don't know. It's just all thoughts.
Right.
With that, go ahead.
May I just
No, you can finish up.
share my final thoughts? So I did.
Is that a Jerry Springer statement?
Is it? Maybe. So after the last meeting, I did a lot of soul searching, and I really did struggle with coming up with the units. I've heard what Mike has said. I like the idea of units as a guideline for folks who don't know, but as I did the research, there really isn't a standard. So it's kind of an arbitrary number. It honestly is, and I tried to be as generous as I could because it pains me to think that I'm going to tell Fred or Joe down the street, like, sorry, you don't have quite enough land, you have to get rid of some animals. Like, that breaks my heart, So these are just meant as a starting point. For the record, I'm not 100% sold on the idea of units for that reason, because it really is an arbitrary number. There are so many other factors, which I tried to include, saying to consider the land, are they grazing, are they not? And I also did put, to speak to this gentleman's comment, they are, in a way, to check and balance one another. There's the part about the animal welfare concerns. There's the grandfathering to protect the rights of folks who already have animals, and then there's the application for a special permit, so that if you want to have over and above the guidelines, you can apply, and then it will be up to, an inspection and the Board of Health and so forth. So that way they kind of check and balance one another. So it still is fluid. There are still options, and the clause that we added from last time where you can apply to an independent person for a hearing. So it's nothing set in stone, and I don't want to restrict anyone, so just wanted to share that.
Yeah, the thought process on the variance and the special permit, Fred decides he wants to have double the amount of chickens. Is there a cost associated with that?
That would be up to the Board of Health if they want to charge for that. We could suggest a small fee. I know folks really put up a stink about having fees, so.
I would suggest no fee if you went that route, right?
It's not really a permit, it's just an application for a variance. You'd have to fill something out.
Correct.
Yeah. But before we get to that, we still got to figure out the density. It's going to keep coming back to that.
Right.
Because it's hard to make a decision on that without identifying that.
Right. I just don't know how to define it. I was thinking this might be ridiculous. Speed limits? Does, you know how usually a thickly settled area, it's a lower speed limit, does that,
If the houses are less than 200 feet apart, you have to go 20 miles an hour. Yeah, I remember that
Does that-
back in the 70s.
does that have any correlation to density in this town? Does does anyone know, does that correlate in town at all to
That
density?
could vary by street,
Right,
6 houses in a row that are
Right.
200 feet apart, and then you've got a big long space of 1,000
Right.
feet with no houses,
yeah, I'm just trying to think how to define density.
all on the same square mile.
I'll look into it and see what community development has on that, and we can get some answers.
Community
It's
development.
difficult, because we got two problems, right? One, we're trying to come up with something, but then you're so personally attached to what it is that you're trying to come up with. It's hard to come up with a
No,
solution for it.
it's not even that, it's just
Well,
how
I
to
think it's that,
define.
because I have that particular issue, so,
I have that problem.
right? So,
When I come up with regulations,
Right.
none of us
Well, we're-
ultimately, I don't want one.
Nope.
I know he doesn't want one. I know
Right.
Chris doesn't want one. I don't think Darlene wants one. I don't
want any.
I think,
Who knows what I want?
right. Linda doesn't know.
You want a horse again.
Linda doesn't know what she wants, so I can't answer that. So, but realistically,
Right,
nobody wants it, but I think there's a need for it. There has to be, because there's just issues going on
it is
that
kind
they
of,
have no way of answering.
it's curious that we're all here writing a rule that none of us want.
I know.
Well,
that's a fact.
well, you did one thing. You got Hunter to smile, so you did make something. So
We've seen the other towns' regulations.
That's terrifying.
We don't like any of them.
There was one that was 118 pages long, like some
I'll
of
get to you in
them.
a second, Hunter.
It's insane. We don't want that.
Nope.
So we got to come up with something better.
So I personally volunteered for this thing because I would rather have input into the solution than to sit there and accept what's.
That's
given.
why I'm here too.
And
That's why
I
I'm
get
here
some
too.
criticism along the way, but nothing I'm not used to. But my personal intention, and I think everybody sitting at this table, as well as the people in the audience, are sincere in the fact that they're trying to come up with something that makes sense, right? Some people are opposed to it, and I could side with them on that, but that's not the answer, right? But enough of that stuff. With that, we'll take Hunter's last, he'll have the last word, not you. The last word, and then we'll end this. Go ahead, Hunter.
There's a two-part question. So you mentioned something about getting enough signatures to take it to town meeting. Is that just signatures? Who is it then given to make that process go forward?
So if you wanted to get onto the ballot and you did a petition, you get the signature, you get on the town hall, you get down the town clerk, you get a petition, you get it signed, you hand it to the Board of Selectmen, and it automatically gets put on the warrant. They don't have a say on it because it's a people's petition. Yep.
The second part, I think that would be a little more appropriate considering going that route, even not my own opinion, but others.
Yep.
Because it makes no sense to have it go, basically, it wouldn't make sense to have the Board of Health who did this, who basically stuck us with this fiasco to begin with, to have them then decide it when they are the ones who dropped it on us in the first place and then resigned in disgrace, basically. So I wouldn't see that as appropriate for a Board of Health to give itself more power versus people who are going to be affected by it anyway. So I think that would be more appropriate.
Yep. I'm glad that you're at least speaking to me, right?
Yes.
So that's a positive movement. So we should agree to disagree to start with, right?
On what?
On anything in life, right? Agree to disagree. That's just, yeah, but anyways. But be part of the process, and you're going to get a lot further. If you don't and add into it, then you're going to be what I didn't want to be, sitting at home and accepting what's handed. If you come in and participate, you've been here every meeting, so you see I try to engage at certain things. The second meeting, I didn't for the simple fact is I wanted to get to a point where we get some sort of template to start with, right? Because that's a productive way to do it, just so we can get to the end of the process.
A lot of like-minded people here, so.
Yep, yep.
And if we bring it to.
And we are too. Believe it or not, we are too. But we're trying to assist in the process instead of just accepting what is going to be handed to us, right? And I think you could bring value to the conversation. Just be willing to be part of the process, and we can get there, right? Something's got to happen. We can't do nothing at all. If we could do nothing at all, none of us would have been here.
Technically, we can do nothing.
Okay.
It's all to be voted on, goes to town meeting or anything.
Yep.
That's more of a procedural thing.
Yeah, no, then go that route if you want. I'm only making a suggestion to you. I'm not telling you what to do, I'm just making a suggestion. I welcome your assistance if that's what you want to do.
I appreciate that.
If you don't want to do it, then I can't make you do it. Yes, Alice?
Just a follow-up to Hunter's question. If this were to go to town meeting and it's voted down, does it go back the next year, or is it done?
No,
What-
the Board
what
of
is-
Health.
I don't know. So this is the Board of Health has the ability to make a regulation, right? What you, at town meeting would be a bylaw that you would do. You couldn't go to town meeting and say, the Board of Health can't do anything. That's not a possibility. It's a regulatory board, right? And the Board of Health of all, and I can mute this, a Board of Health is probably the strongest board of all the boards around, right? And they can open and close businesses if that's what they want, if they find sufficient reason to do that, right? But I think the process, as a group, we can all get through this, not just a group here, but you guys sitting in the audience, right? You're all coming, and I try to engage with you to make you part of the process and not just stopping, no, I don't want to hear nothing, and play that silliness. I got on boards because I didn't like that process. I didn't like what it was. I think it's important to be able to speak your mind and bring things forward, right? And if somebody else doesn't have the courage to say it, I'll say it for them. It doesn't really matter. I'm not worried about it. But we don't need to fight about it. We'll get there. We'll go through the process. And if everybody's listening to me, Jessica has one approach, I have another approach, right? I'm trying to deregulate it a little bit. She's trying to increase. No, relax.
No, I'm not.
But you have more in there that I'm trying to pull back, right? And no, you watch the tape, you'll see it. But anyways, we're a group. We all have an opinion, and that's what we're here for, right? And to get it all on paper. So I think we'll get there. With that, I want to go home. I think everybody else would like to go home. So if nobody else has anything urgent.
I actually have something else to say.
Oh, Jesus. I said Hunter had the last word.
That's too bad. I don't want to rock the boat, but I'm going to because I have to speak from my authentic self. Why is it a secret whether this is a regulation or a bylaw? Because I think that's what's making people nervous, and it's making me nervous.
It's a secret.
It's a procedure.
It's not, I've asked the question, Linda asked the question.
So I
It hasn't
would
been answered.
suggest that you go to the next Board of Health meeting and ask them, because I don't have the answer for you.
I did
Okay.
email Kristen, she didn't respond.
I would go and ask them.
Because I think it would either ease people's minds or at least let them know what they're up against, and say, just to play a scenario, if Hunter decides he wants to propose a bylaw and he goes out and gets 200 signatures and writes his own bylaw, how does that conflict if they want to put a regulation? How would that work out?
A bylaw would supersede a regulation.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. So that answers that question. And I'm going to make an assumption. I don't think Hunter wants to draw up a bylaw. I think he wants to limit or eliminate the proposal of a regulation or a bylaw, right? You don't have to agree or disagree, it doesn't matter. But
I don't know what
this,
he wants.
all we're going to do is we're going to make a recommendation to the Board of Health. My understanding is they're looking to make a regulation, because then that's done during the public hearing, at their own meeting. Right? And some of those Board of Health positions are elected, I believe. So if you don't agree with the staff, just like if people don't agree with what I do on the Board of Selectmen or on, that's the only one I'm elected to. So you just come out and vote and take me out. No, but it's that simple, right? So that's how government works. Everybody has that right, but I believe it's a regulation.
Okay.
I will, since I told you to go to Board of Health, I'll find out tomorrow what it is, and I see you, Jesse, and I'll tell you what it is and make sure everybody else is aware of it.
Thank you.
Well, at the next meeting, I'll have an answer, whether it's a regulation or a bylaw that they're seeking to get from us. That's the last one, Jesse. Go for it.
I was just going to say, I believe Corey has stated from the Board of Health several times in his prior meetings that he intended this to go for town vote.
Yes, I had asked the
I believe he
question.
said that several times.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I didn't go to several meetings. I only went to a
I don't
couple,
think
so.
he really
In
knew.
December and March, when they had their Board of Health meetings, he was claiming he wanted this for spring or fall town
Yep.
meeting. So I believe his intention from prior meetings was that it's going to go to a bylaw.
Even though it's,
I'm going to do my due diligence to get the answer
Verify.
from whoever I need to get it from, and I'll get it from multiple sources to make sure we get the proper answer as to whether it's going to be a regulation or a bylaw, that we know what we're going to do. But I was never under the impression that we were drafting a bylaw. But, anybody want to adjourn?
Yes.
make a
Second.
motion to adjourn. Oh, you
All
made
right.
it? Did you second?
I second.
Motion's made and seconded, and we're going to adjourn at 9:17. All in favor?
Aye.
Next meeting?